All right. Hello and welcome to episode 59 of the Liberland Show. I'm your host, Adam J. Carswell. Today we are joined by Stefan Rust, a serial entrepreneur and founder of Sonic Capital. Stefan, it is an honor to have you here. We've had a great chat coming into this. Got to say thank you to Jillian Godsill as well. As I just said, happy to have you here. Do you have any opening remarks for our listeners today?
No, thank you for having me, Adam, and great to connect with you. And yeah, today's my birthday. Just I'm going to announce that right away. So 19th of November. Anyway,
Happy
so
birthday.
thank you.
We'll do our best not to date this interview, but that's good. And it's funny you said the 19th. I'm like, wait, because so guys, Stefan's talking to me from the other side of the world right now. As some and most of you know, I'm in Newfoundland, Canada right now, but Stefan is calling in from Hong Kong. And we're going to talk a little bit about Hong Kong today, as well as a few other things. But before we get all into that, Stefan, tell us a little bit about your Liberland journey. How did you first find out about Liberland, and maybe a little bit of what you worked on since getting to know us?
Yeah, no. I mean, obviously, I found out through Liberland, actually through Roger, when I was working as CEO of Bitcoin.com. And throughout that journey, I mean, it was very clear the objectives behind Liberland and the benefits and opportunities that Liberland presents in terms of redirecting and putting governance on the blockchain, the truth machine blockchain. And I actually then met with Vit and Ali Kazab and the team in Vienna at a conference that was organized by Bruce Porter and the Washington Elite Group. So it was a sort of sweet, sort of exclusive, sort of limited audience, and it was very well done. And anyway, we then had the opening of the embassy, the Liberland consulate, I think it was, in Vienna.
Nice.
And that's, yeah, so it was interesting.
I was going to say too, I maybe I'm behind the times a little bit, but it's the first time I've heard blockchain referred to as the truth machine, and I love that. So I'm probably going to be taking that from you here moving forward.
So if you think about it, there was a report, and I can't remember who it's by, but I should send you the link afterwards. But there are a number of reports, and if you just do Google search, corporate fraud, and if you look at, there's $5 trillion in annual fraud, governance and corporate fraud around the world every single year. 5 trillion. That's bigger than the U.S. healthcare industry. So where is that money going? How is that being defrauded? What are the frauds? It'd be interesting to have a look at that. But if you think about that, if that's all on the blockchain and we save at least 10% of that, that's already $500 million worth of savings.
Absolutely. And maybe for some of our listeners who are wondering what you mean by, that being on the blockchain, how does that prevent fraud? Could you give just maybe a third grade explanation on how blockchain can prevent fraud and things like this happening?
Well, two things. One is transparency, right? You have a whole set of transparency on the blockchain. Number one, anybody can see the wallet. You can see any transaction. Number one. Number two is you also have the hosting of the ledger in terms of where that database, it's distributed everywhere, and the multiple parties that are ensuring the accuracy of that database is held by different people. And so you have to change all the ledgers across all the hosted environments in order to do some sort of fraud. And then lastly, you have this thing called smart contracts or consensus mechanism that is written into a code that says how consensus is achieved for the allocation of funds, for example. Yes. Or the generation of funds or the distribution of funds, whatever that might be. So those are just some examples as to simply put how the blockchain works.
Thank you. And one thing you just mentioned, and I don't know, it just slipped my mind at the beginning, but yes, guys, Stefan is also former CEO of Bitcoin.com, pretty reputable. He's got quite a resume as well. Let's kind of dive into your resume a little bit, and then we'll get to some other cool topics. So tell us about, your journey as a serial entrepreneur, if you can, the Cliff Notes version, and then maybe even, a couple projects or companies that you're working on right now that you're really excited about.
Yeah, so I was lucky to get involved. I think I always had a nose for new trends, new technologies, and I got super excited about that. It started off with the internet. I mean, without the internet, I don't think I would have graduated from university. And it was very basic internet because I'm super old, but it was using CompuServe, right? So before we had the Mosaic browser or yeah, the Netscape browser as it was then sort of came about. Then I sort of got into the mobile industry. I loved mobile. I think everybody wanted to have something in their hands alone just for the calls before we then had it. I then got involved in setting up a mobile network in China because I felt that I wanted to learn Mandarin and Chinese. 1.2 billion people speak Chinese. So it's quite a good chance that that will be of value in the future. So I combined my Chinese experience with the mobile revolution, if you will. We built out 4 networks in China, sold the networks to China Unicom that wanted to go public and they needed the underlying assets. So that was my first step into real big scale entrepreneurialism. And I just sort of, I was very fortunate to it to go well. Then I met Sun Microsystems. I came across Sun Microsystems, met with Jonathan Schwartz, who then became the CEO. And yeah, basically he wanted to take Java onto the mobile phones and was looking to complement his team to help do that. And so I was fortunate to join that. And we basically grew that industry to Java being pretty much on every single phone out there today. So that was super exciting. But then I felt that, I wanted my back to my entrepreneurial experience. And so after 7 years, really sort of helping scale the mobile industry, we saw that the iPhone was coming out, apps was going to be everywhere, and all the OEMs in terms of handset manufacturers were going to look to build out app stores. How do we get those app stores and apps onto all the other phones that are not just the iPhone, And so helped with companies like Sony, with Qualcomm, with Intel, with Motorola, with Ericsson. How do we help them find developers to build apps on their platforms? And so we built a developer network. So that was my next sort of big thing, was a developer agency. We had about 60,000 software engineers. We were doing 30 hackathons a year anywhere around the world. And then all of a sudden, somebody wanted to get paid in Bitcoin. It's like, what is that Bitcoin? This was around 2012. And then I looked up Bitcoin and boom, wow, it's like super fascinating how easily I could trade it, instantaneous, no fees, via a Skype call, right? And you could just buy it you had your own wallet. I mean, it wasn't too easy to use. You had to sort of really dig around a little bit, learn what the tools were, etc. But once you got a hang of it, it was amazing. And I just got hooked from then on in. After that, I then sort of, I was still running my agency, but I was paying all the developers. We were building applications for big companies, and then we were paying the developers in Bitcoins. And so that was pretty exciting. And then bumped into Roger in Hong Kong at a conference, and we just sort of hit it off pretty well.
You could call it a Hong conference. I'm probably not the
Hong
first one to
Kong,
that joke.
Yeah, then sort of one thing led to the next, and I was the CEO of Bitcoin.com until April this year, and the pandemic had hit, and I just felt that blockchain needs to do something good, right? It needs to be shown. The whole perception in the world is blockchain's negative. It's only crooks that use it, and it's largely disseminated by the financial institutions because they're not a part of it. This has been the first time in history that the blockchain has grown from the ground up, right? It's all of some money and wealth has been created from the ground up. It's not been top down, and you don't need somebody top down to help influence it. And I think that's been the unique benefit. And I think people just were jealous. They didn't like that. The governments nobody understood it. And so unless you do invest the time to really comprehend it and understand it, how do we change that perception now? What do we need to do to get people to think slightly differently and understand that this tool can be used for good, and its foundation is for the good, right? It was built to allow everybody to participate, allow everybody to benefit from having Bitcoin versus just few that get allocated money from the printer that goes brr, right?
So many things you just said that like I wish I could go back and zone in on each one. I made a few notes here. I mean,
Yeah.
one thing right there that I do want to highlight, talking about how it's kind of been labeled a bad thing or a negative thing, blockchain and cryptocurrency, which I do think we're getting to a point now where it's moving beyond that laughing phase, where some people either
Yeah.
call it bad or they laugh at it. And um, I was like, what, 5 years old when the internet came out or whatever. But I've seen videos and clips, for example, like they'll never forget. There's this clip I've seen like with Bill Gates on like the David Letterman show in the mid '90s, and so David Letterman like, so what's this internet thing you got? And they get the whole crowd to laugh at Bill Gates. It's like, okay, look at us now. Um,
Yeah.
so I think blockchain has a similar vibe where it's one of those things where for the first 5 to 10 years, get some fingers pointed at it and laughs and jokes, and then give it 15, 20 years, it's going to be so much of a part of what we're doing on a daily basis that we won't even know what hit us.
Definitely. I mean, I love that. I mean, I think that's such a good analogy, right? I mean, I call it gradually, then suddenly, right? It's like we're gradually going to see it become more and more established. And the next thing we know, all of a sudden you're paying in crypto, you're using tokens for this, right? This token is giving you access to that, etc. And I think a large portion, I was just thinking this morning, right? The Bitcoin price has gone up. It's a lot of institutional money or professional money now coming in to crypto. And I think that's what's slowly driving it up, right? However, I talk to all these startups and entrepreneurs that are building solutions around this. And if I look at the ones that are doing it for the institutions, they're treating it like a share class or an FX exposure, right? So they're coming very much from the financial angle, which is definitely one way to come at it. But actually, if you look at a lot of these tokens, they're utility tokens, right? A large portion of them, you need your Anchor token to be able to stake on Anchor. You need your your Ethereum token to use the Ethereum network to get the consensus off Ethereum, right? Things like that. And so in order to leverage, it's a toll, if you will, for using the underlying service that is maintained by all the participants that are providing the governance and ensuring accuracy and hosting those nodes, those mining rigs, those whatever it is that they're hosting.
Okay, and then I might end up pressing the extend button, depending on how much extra time we have here today. Because I think we're going to go over our little bit normal time. And the first thing I have to say is you mentioned a handful of projects that you've worked on, and you still your hands are still full to this day with some really exciting things. One of which is a company, Seeds, or if there's a part of the company name that I'm missing, correct me. But I want to also make sure now before I forget too, like guys, Stefan has newsletters and ways you can subscribe to what he's doing. If you look into any of his stuff, I highly recommend. I'm probably going to say it at the end of the interview, but I just want to say it once here and now. Go check out his content and his newsletters, get subscribed to what he's doing. Could you tell us a little bit about Seeds? Because I know I'm new to the network now. What did I just get myself into?
So Join Seeds is basically a community of people that have a strong interest in seeing a change come about in how the planet is governed and how we're using the resources across the planet, and spending our time and effort and energy as a result out of that. And joinseeds.com is the manifestation of that. And Seeds is a token that represents and identifies that community and allows us to exchange within that community a token of appreciation or of value. And it can go so far to the extent that local farmer that created a nice local tomato, you can pay them in seeds. You want to go to a festival where it's all about how to cultivate and sequester carbon dioxide, you can go and pay with seeds. So there's a whole set of communities, which are individuals that are part of that. There are projects that are associated with that. And then how do we, and the Seeds is the joining factor. It's the social object, for lack of a better name, that brings everybody and holds everybody together.
I love it. Really cool. So as I mentioned, some other companies here that you're involved with, but one thing that also came to my attention in your background and your story, I I guess one a little bit, how did you find yourself in this Chinese environment? It sounds like you're in, as I mentioned, in Hong Kong now, and then so kind of tell us how you got involved with China, and then I would love to hear your take as best as you can on what's going on in the world right now, because living in North America, I know that whatever is being forced into my head on social media or TV is probably not accurate entirely as to what's actually taking place in China, and it might even be the other way around. So I just want to know, like, what are you seeing that's like actually going on and taking place during this whole, pandemic, as best you can with, you know where I'm going. Help me out.
No, I think, I mean, I was born in Hong Kong, so that's sort of partially why I sort of feel a bit attached to Hong Kong. But then I left and I felt I didn't speak the language anymore. I lost the language. And then rather than learn Cantonese, which is generally the language that's spoken in the southern part of China, I would learn Mandarin because everybody in China speaks Mandarin. And that's sort of what got me back. And what brought me back from Bay Area or San Francisco was I saw this melting pot of Hong Kong with lots of money, very interesting money market, very sophisticated exchanges, high volume. And you had this brilliant engineering talent that was aggregated from all over China to a place called Shenzhen, which is half an hour away from Hong Kong downtown, right? And so you have these two melting pots that if we could bring them together, we could create the next sort of Silicon Valley, if you wanted, in this part of the world. However, that just never happened, right? It's still very separate. There was a border between the two. Despite 1997 coming about and the two countries supposedly having to merge, it never really happened. And I think that was, but I love living here since then. I stayed here. I spent most of my time whilst I'm here traveling around the world. So last year I was on the road, I think nearly 90% of the time. I was in 90 different cities around the world, and we were growing the Bitcoin Cash community as well as Bitcoin.com with that community everywhere in the world, and building new products and really just driving that around the world. And what I love about Hong Kong, though, and it was always nice to come back to Hong Kong, it's super easy. The bureaucracy is very low. It's very lightweight. It's very entrepreneurial. There's a lot of energy. A lot of people come in and out and through Hong Kong. So mobility is also very high. So those are just some of the interesting elements as to why Hong Kong is very attractive. The last year has been super sensitive, let's put it like that. Mm-hmm. I mean, we saw a lot of the protests, and that went around the world. And I think accurately so, those protests are not only manifest in Hong Kong, I think we see them also in Paris with the Yellow Movement. You see them across the Middle East, where in Beirut, look at that upset and the clampdown that happened in Beirut. You see that in Venezuela and all these other countries where I think what's happening is, my sentiment is that the youth doesn't have hope. We're not providing hope to the next generation, right? Where do they grow? Where are the opportunities? And it's all governed by legacy infrastructure that is so old. It hasn't adapted to the new age of the 21st century, where computers are pervasive. Everybody has a computer in their hand. Soon we're going to have a computer in our glasses, right? We have not adapted, and our lawyers are not capable of understanding that evolution and how to facilitate and build out sufficient regulation to support that and get rid of all the old regulations that were set up back in 1800s, right? And it's like, how do we now change that? And the youth is feeling that right now. It's like anytime you want to start a new business or you want to set up a bank account, how many forms do we have to fill out? How many KYCs? How many approvals? What other documents do you need? And you better show me the original documents. And it's like, who has an original document of my certificate when I went to school back in 1927 or whenever I went to school, right? I don't have that anymore. It's just like, look, you can call them up and check it out. You got to believe me. And so things like that. It's like, how do we adapt for that? And then how do we provide hope? Where new job opportunities are going to come from? What are those job opportunities? At the moment, I mean, I can go down a rabbit hole, but in Hong Kong,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Children, they've got PhD. They live at home at 30 years old, 35 years old, because they can't find a job that values that PhD. You have a lot of, and so the local companies here are not, they care about salespeople, and you don't need a PhD or to hire those people. And they care about, China market. And so they're hiring all the people from China, bringing them to Hong Kong. And just, I think the population and the youth in Hong Kong feels our forefathers built this country. We're not having a part of the future growth and the prosperity, and not allowed to take part involved in that. Right. And I think there's just been no R&D and building out future infrastructure that's going to enable the next generation to be a part of.
Right. So it sounds a little bit like the spirit of what brought Hong Kong to where it's at. Maybe in some sense, it just kind of hit its peak, and it could be, heading in a different direction. Where are you seeing around the world that spirit, we'll say that made Hong Kong what it was? Where is that going to? Because I like to say, in a lot of ways, like what we have going on at Liberland, we might not have the physical infrastructure in place yet, but you look at, I said, anyone who listens to the show, you hear me say this like every episode now, but like you look at the individuals who made their way across the Atlantic Ocean, 500 years ago to find a more free, better life. They're all pioneers, they're entrepreneurs, they're people who many would consider crazy, and they went on to establish, the U.S. And again, we look at what Hong Kong had. You look at places. I've never been to Singapore or any of these other city states like Monaco that are supposedly flourishing with this same spirit. We see that in Liberland. But is there anywhere in the world where you're seeing like people gravitate towards right now?
But I think that's the whole thing, right? Liberland's advantage is the spirit, right? And the spirit is, and we live in a digital world. You talked about the internet earlier, right? You're in Newfoundland. I'm here in Hong Kong, right? We're in totally opposite ends of the world. Yet thanks to the internet, we're all behind a common spirit, the Liberland show, or around Liberland, right? And that's what drives us, and that allows us to stay connected with our peers around the world. These borders or these imaginary lines that have been drawn up on a piece of paper, I think over time will just their importance is eroding. Mm-hmm. And so what then ties us together is much more the community, the spirit behind that community. And that's what's holding us together. And I think that's leading to a larger set of fragmentation within society, because we're getting more and more micro communities, right? Versus one big 300 million or 1.2 billion people that I can reach out to via mass media. Social media has allowed us to create social groups, right, that have common interests. And I think that is really interesting, particularly if we can make sure that we retain the overlap between each of these communities and spirits, right? I just think that we also need to provide a framework versus trying to regulate every single step of the path that you have to take in order to get to some sort of entrepreneurial opportunity. How do we set the framework? Look, you can play within this framework, do whatever you want. We may change the framework from time to time, but this is the framework today. Go make your opportunities. And okay, I know I can play within this framework, and then I can do whatever I want. And they should not be limited by borders or by functionalities and legalities that were set up a long time ago.
Yeah. And I almost went this way I almost got political. I almost started going like, tell me what you think is true and not true about the virus, that type of thing. But like, what, let's take it and shift it this direction. Cause this is one thing I know we all can control. And one thing I've heard recently that just really just made me look at things differently. I'm going to say quick shout out to a guy named Russell Brunson. Focusing your energy on you and your time in your business and your family, like that's what we can control. Those are our nations. So like, I guess just give a little bit of advice for, the individuals out there who are looking to kind of win from within. Like, what are some best practices right now as we make our way through this transition?
I think that's a right angle. It's focus on yourself, your proximity, your family, your society, your communities, and really sort of try and grow from within there. To be honest, I've been heads down this whole COVID, element, right? I think it represents huge opportunity. The transformation has just been accelerated at warp speed, you know, and I think the world hasn't realized that. We all live in it. For us, it's natural. We've always worked decentralized. I'm on my own, I'm working from home. But I think a lot of enterprise and a lot of companies and individuals have never experienced what that's like. And so they've now, all of a sudden, within the last 6 months, have come up to speed what it's like to wake up in the morning, get on a Zoom call. It's to have your stand-up meeting in a Zoom call, to develop in an agile fashion versus a waterfall fashion, right? To build products. How do I ship products? Oh, how many I can have 7 meetings a day instead of only 1, because I can do them all on Zoom, right? I can do 7 meetings a day instead of 1. So all of a sudden, the world I can now pay all digitally, right? People aren't using cash anymore. How do we make sure that that digital movement is now using crypto and tokens as a forms of payment versus a 3% charge for using American Express and Visa, and then PayPal on top of that? And, you know, so how do we increase efficiencies? And that will come when people start looking for margin, once they've gone all digital and they realize I got to pay a 3% fee. Ooh, there's this thing called Bitcoin. I can use that. And there's no charges if I transfer Bitcoin Cash. If I use Bitcoin Cash, I can convert the Bitcoin into Bitcoin Cash, and I can use that for my payments. What's my cash flow requirements going down the path? And then how do I use that as payments, right? And so those are things that I find will evolve, right? I mean, companies, you already see there's bitcoinenterprises.com. I don't know if you've seen, or enterprise, where you can actually go and see what companies have moved their balance sheet into Bitcoin and what portion of that, and how has that balance sheet performed based on public statements. So you can then see, once I've got I've got 400 million of Bitcoin in my balance sheet. Ooh, you know, why am I not trading in Bitcoin and keeping that currency, particularly if it's appreciating? And I think it's already appreciated like 20% since they first announced it, right? And so you look at that and things like that. What does that mean also then from a governance standpoint? How do I, as a government, get engaged in that? What do I need to do to bring my governance onto the blockchain, enable payment, enable support to my services? And how do I hold my services accountable for what they say they're going to do in terms of building new roads, building a hospital, funding education programs? How do I hold that service accountable for actually allocating and investing in education, infrastructure, schooling, whatever it is?
Absolutely. And I think that's, I'll do our best to close it out here. I know we're having a good time. The one cool thing that we see in Liberland is, you know, we are that pioneer. We are the example that can show the world like, hey, look, this does work. Or for those who don't want it to work, you know, this is a perfect chance. Give Liberland a try, so that way you have something to point your finger at and say it didn't work. Now, we obviously are very confident in what's going to happen, but I guess you know, one more thing here. I want to kind of get your vision for the future of Liberland. It's always helpful for us as Liberlandians to kind of speak what we want to see into existence, and we have seen that actually come from the show in a few ways, which is cool. So we're creating the future of Liberland here, Stefan. What are some things that you're looking forward to in the country, and maybe that you would like to see happen?
You know, I'd love to see that reference case get more awareness, right? I'd love to be able to have more countries adopt the policies and the innovation, and take maybe not all of it, but take from the learnings of what Liberland is trying to do in terms of innovating how governments are run, and take that into their account. And the best way to do that is, number one, is how do we grow as many citizens as possible as to be members of Liberland? And I have to really confess that I am not yet a citizen, but I am. Right after the show, I will, and I will post a sticker and a photo to show that I have submitted my application for citizenship. But then how do we get more citizens into Liberland, number one? Number two is, then how do we enable those citizens to use their citizenship as a means to travel to other countries? so that all of a sudden mobility, and by traveling into other countries, I create awareness of what's going on. And then that will possibly lead back into new citizens and new policies that will go beyond just travel. And, you know, I mean, the big controversy now is elections, right? I mean, after the elections that happened in the US, you know, it's like everybody's sort of coming up with ideas. Oh, we could put that on the blockchain, right? So
yeah, you're right though. You're right.
That's, I mean, the ultimate, right?
I think that is definitely something we will likely start to see moving forward. So, you know, again, hopefully we are the leaders in that, and we're just going to keep doing our thing. So, Stefan, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to be here with us. I know I heard your phone going off a few times, so we'll let you get back to business.
Yeah.
Any closing remarks or parting words of wisdom for our listeners?
No, super good. Keep innovating, you know, and participate and contribute in as many projects as you can. Yeah, and if you get into blockchain, go 24-hour blockchain. Go 100% crypto. I just think that's where the future is going to be. There's going to be so many opportunities that are created. Obviously, do your own research, understand what you want to do. But my advice is, you know, I'm fully crypto. I think it's a fascinating and a large pool of innovators and innovation taking place right now.
Absolutely.
And sign up for Liberland.
Thank you. Yeah, guys, go to liberland.org, and we hope to see you there. One more thing, best way for anyone listening to follow up and get in touch with you, would it be through going to your website, newsletter? I mean, you kind of give us the one single best way you prefer for listeners to get in touch.
Telegram, Twitter, srust99, SRUST 99. That's my handle. You can find me on Twitter and on Telegram, or you can go to our website, LinkedIn. You know, there are all these tools available, so you can reach me through most of those channels.
srust99.
Thank you.
And that's the year you were born, right?
That's the year I was born. Not quite, but I was.
Cool. All right.
Okay.
Well, ladies and gentlemen. Yep. This has been episode 59 of the Liberland Show. We were joined by Stefan Rust, serial entrepreneur and founder of Sonic Capital. I'm your host, Adam J. Carswell. Thank you for tuning in, and we will catch you in the next episode.